Featherweights on the marquee coming up this weekend, the main event of UFC Vegas 81. You've got Super Sodiq Yusuff taking on Edson Barboza, a guy who's in the top 10 all-time for knockdowns in UFC histories, for bonuses. He's up there in a lot of those respects. He got very, very close to that lightweight title picture, but he wasn't able to get it done. And seemingly bridesmaid, but never the bride, Edson Barboza looking to turn away yet again another prospect. As always, one half of your host duo, Craig Allen, Twitter and Instagram at Craig Allen FNP. With me to my left, to your right, respective socials at Matt Allen FNP. I even changed the graphic. I get X up there, so you can find us there. But Matt, when we look at this fight, I know a lot of people are excited about it because for Sodiq Yusuff, he's been away for a very long time, and I'll throw it up there. MMA Fighting, they did an interview with him at the start of the year, and he was talking about his unprofessional fight breakdowns on Twitter because he's had to find something to kind of pass the time as he twiddles his thumbs. And he mentioned it in that article. You know, he's had the back injury, and he was going to take a fight, but then he had to wait quite a bit. He had an article that came out today, Monday, before the fights of Fight Week, with Spencer Kite, British Columbia's finest, and he said that it was L4, L5 were the back issues that he had, herniated disc there, and he's just been away kind of on the sidelines looking to recoup, recover, and get fresh for a matchup like this. And for Sodiq Yusuff, it was a long time away too, before he ended up fighting Don Shainis last year, where I mean, listen, he was a massive, more than a 10-1 favorite in that one, and he looked like it. He completely dismantled Shainis in the first round, but Yusuff with a very tough test in Barboza. He's faced long-rangey strikers in the past. He's fought Andre Fili. He's had some really big fights, too. People might forget some of them, but if you look at it for Yusuff, it's not a Sodiq Yusuff fight. If he doesn't get hit and Raggedy Andy'd in the first round, either drop or the knees kind of drop and then he pops himself back up. Uncredited knockdowns, as we say in the business, for Yusuff to get into it, get tight, and get a win. And the only time that we've really seen him not be able to get over that hump was against Arnold Allen, where he gets dropped, he gets into some of the wrestling exchanges, he can never get his rhythm going. And for Barboza, when you're trying to make the stylistic comp, Barboza, you know him for the Terry Edom kick. You know him for the leg kicks. I think at the highest of highs
his
being
boxing's good too.
His fight where Billy Quarantillo's bringing it to him, and then just in that exchange, pop with the knee, and he slumps him in the first round. Or his fight against Dan Hooker.
Shane Burgos.
But then on the or Shane Burgos, but on the flip side, then you think of that Giga Chikadze fight.
And this is why I have such a hard time with this fight. You are right to bring up the injuries of Sodiq Yusuff because they should be a big conversation of this matchup. He's an extremely athletic fighter who really does rely on his physical strength to go out there and get these wins, be it with his punches or even with some of the wrestling that we have seen. Here's the problem, though. Edson Barboza, and I don't feel good saying this at all, how much does he have left as a fighter? Like, the guy has been in nothing but crazy fights his whole entire life, and I just don't know if the damage has taken its toll on him. I remember bringing this up a lot going into the Bryce Mitchell fight, and even after it, was, hey, he got dropped by a jab. He had been dropped by jabs before that. I remember Cowboy Cerrone dropped him with a jab before he was able to get him with a rear naked choke, but that was 10 years ago. Now when he starts to eat damage, and I bring up the Shane Burgos fight almost as a counter to my own point, because Shane Burgos was able to land some pretty good shots on him throughout that matchup, but ultimately we all remember the finish. Edson landed that big overhand and then the delayed reaction of Burgos. I just don't know if Edson can eat those big shots coming back his way. And I know every now and then he's able to eat them, but in large parts, he can't implement his boxing like he once was able to. And that was the most underrated part of his game. Even in the early goings of the Justin Gaethje fight, he was having some success with his own hands, countering Justin Gaethje, making his entries. But, of course, he was circling off the cage, gets hit by a big shot. And I think that's a position he might find himself in again against a guy like Sodiq Yusuff, because you bring up the leg kicks of Edson Barboza. Sodiq Yusuff can check leg kicks. He's pretty darn good at it, actually. And I do think that is a big X factor anytime you talk about Edson Barboza fight. Because going into the Burgos matchup, what was the big conversation? Can the boxing of Burgos get to Barboza before the leg kicks of Barboza get to Burgos? Sodiq Yusuff, I think he's going to get hit by some leg kicks, don't get me wrong, but I do think he is more well-equipped defensively to deal with those leg kicks and at least elongate the matchup that way. And we haven't even gotten to the fact that this is a 5-round fight for Sodiq Yusuff. I'm really curious to see how much that's going to matter. It might not matter either way because both guys have insane power and could finish this fight at any point, but do you think either guy is going to get a big edge because of the 5-round atmosphere? Is that a big point for
Yeah,
Barboza.
I mean, again, Barboza, he has 15 knockdowns. That's 4th all-time in UFC history. He's fought in main events. I say bridesmaid, but never the bride. And when you look at this fight, yeah, I do think it gives an edge to Edson Barboza. You look at it for Sodiq Yusuff, he has a crazy fight against Beast Boy Mike Davis over on Contender Series. He gets a win there in 2018. Fights Saaiman Mokhtarian, those crazy Mokhtarian brothers, and knocks him out in the first round. He fights Chairez Moraes. He drops him in that fight. Fights Gabriel Benitez, who hits him. They have a rock'em sock'em fight. And going back and watching that fight, I went, Gabriel Benitez dropped him, right? Uncredited knockdown, but there's a short left where he kind of drops, Raggedy Andy, pops right back up, they get back into it, and he ends up finishing with a counter right, Gabriel Benitez. He fights Andre Fili, kind of a Raggedy Andy spot in the first round, springs back up, wins that first round on the judges' scorecards, wins the second round, but Fili rallies back in the third round. He fights Arnold Allen, if I'm not mistaken. He gets hurt in the first round of that fight as well. Alekseeva.
But he rallied at the end of that one, and that is kind of the odd one. A lot of these fights, it is. He's going to start really strong, and then, Andre Fili had some success late. But in that Arnold Allen fight, it was kind of the complete opposite. Sodiq Yusuff struggled early, but as that fight continued, he was getting to Arnold Allen.
And for Edson Barboza, again, he's closer to 38 than he is 37, but once you get up there in age, once you're dropping down the weight class, we saw it with Jose Aldo, still having really good competitive fights against top bantamweights, losing some of the fights, though, as well. So when I do look at this one, Matt, I have it for Sodiq Yusuff. I thought today is the day. He's got a capital C for not captain, for crash the distance. He crashes the distance like very few fighters can. You talk about foot placement. He's always there in the foot placement, even if he's going out there and kind of biting down on the mouthpiece and brawling a little bit more than he should. Because when Yusuff is fighting really technically and he's using that fight IQ that he has, some guys just can't get away, and he's always there to counter and hit the opponent back. And so capital C for crash the distance, but there's a reason why I wore this Jets jersey, Matt, and it's not number 55, it's number 26. Today was a big day for hockey fans, and especially hockey fans in the middle of this country, Matt. Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele signed the exact same deal. $8.5 million a year. They're staying in the coldest city in Canada.
Wow.
And why do I say that? Because for Mark Scheifele, he looked like he was on the outs last year. He looked like the cards were stacked against him. Then to start this year before training camp, they gave the C away. Not to not to Blake Wheeler, but they gave it to Adam Lowry.
Blake Wheeler got the loudest cheer I've ever heard of any athlete my whole entire life.
But they gave it to Adam Lowry. Third line center was really gritty. But all of this to say, Matt, that sometimes you're on the outs, like Blake Wheeler was with the Jets last year, and that could be what we see for Edson Barboza. So the double meaning of the jersey
I'm going to have a comp too. Edson's NBA comp is easily DeMar DeRozan. Like, he's really, really good, has a lot of fans, you're going to remember him, he might even be a Hall of Famer one day. But he isn't in that top tier of like, oh, that is definitely a Hall of Famer, right? Like, Edson Barboza has memorable fights with pretty much everybody, but you can't say he won the majority of them. Well, that was still pretty memorable. Like, by the end of that, he was throwing wheel kicks, even though it was down like 30-20. So it was still pretty memorable for Edson Barboza. My point is, like, there's a lot of people out there who are Edson Barboza fans, right? And there's not a ton of MMA fighters you can say that about. But Edson Barboza, Sodiq Yusuff, guess what? If your girlfriend's got plans and you're not down with them, you can cancel those plans for this fight.
It's one of few.
It's good enough that you could probably get away with it. I think Edson's going to show up the best version of himself because offensively, I still think he is like 98% of what he once was. I just think defensively and in terms of his durability, he is not that same fighter. So for those reasons, I think Yusuff's going to get on the inside. He's going to hit him with some big shots. Expect Yusuff to use the clinch too. I think he's got really nice power up the middle. He's got a good elbow in that spot. And if he is able to land from that range, it's really going to deter Edson from getting close. So I have Sodiq.
Yeah, this is your first time doing one of these videos, just burying the lead. Matt, Sodiq Yusuff, what?
I'm almost certain that you had said you had Sodiq before.
No, I have Edson Barboza to win this fight. 1,800 total votes
how close they are.
On our YouTube community tab poll. 51% Barboza, 49% Yusuff. Fight Hive, at this point in their career, I think Yusuff plays the first round slow. Implements the grappling he's shown his last two fights to wear Barboza against the cage. Lenny saying Barboza has looked good, but father time. In brackets. Sodiq has had enough time to develop as a fighter to pull off the win, I believe. And Quest saying, super close fight. Only beef with Sodiq is that he isn't active. This guy has so much potential, but he fights like once a year on average. I responded, because the guys battle with injury. And I wanted to bring it up, and I did. E. Spencer Kite, this is a direct quotable from Sodiq Yusuff. A week or 2 weeks after that fight, the fight against Don Shainis, I herniated 2 discs in my back, and one of them was really bad, the L4, L5. So it was very painful to stand up or walk around. They told me 6 months, and I tried to speed it up as much as I could, did as much PT as I could, got a couple cortisone injections, but couldn't really beat the projections. So he didn't get the surgery, and he had to take time away from training. And then he's trained, and I'll throw a picture up there. Sodiq Yusuff's been training in the DMV with everybody in around that Washington, Maryland area. And you can see that he brought in a guy that's close by, a guy who trains at Crazy 88 MMA. Matt, you know that guy. It's another Matthew. Semmelsberger, a big body, to try and work in some of those moves. I don't like the time away for Sodiq Yusuff. I don't like the striking defense from Sodiq Yusuff. And I think the boxing and the kicking game of Barboza could take over. The one thing that worries me, though, even in Barboza's fight against Billy Q walked across cage and he was doing really well with his boxing until he wasn't. So for Barboza, he was definitely wearing some of that damage on his face at the end of that first round. He was definitely the victor, but I do have Barboza, and I guess you have Yusuff.
It's a great fight, though. Like, I genuinely think this is going to be fight of the night. You'd be hard-pressed to find anybody who would pick another fight on this card, because it is so competitive, and these are two guys who will, every now and then, kind of go for that fight of the night, you know, and that's what we love both these guys for. So I think it's a phenomenal fight. It's a fight that is going to set them up very well to fight. Probably not a title eliminator the next time out, but you're going to get one of those big names in the featherweight division. Listen, Brian Ortega needs to fight somebody when he comes back. Yair Rodriguez, Josh Emmett's out there.
And
there's a lot of great fighters.
Now, all of a sudden, today, on Monday of Fight Week, Ilia Topuria and Alexander Volkanovski, that's being the fight for the title at UFC 297. Some big-time fights on this card. If anything changes throughout the week, at Fight Night Picks here on YouTube, make sure you toss a subscription out there. You can find us on X and Instagram at that same handle. You are going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.